Welcome to the Explainer. Now, what if the Bible wasn't just a collection of stories or a rule book, but one single coherent epic? Today, we're exploring that very idea, the Bible as a grand story of conflict, rescue, and redemption.
So let's just jump right in with the big question. What kind of book is the Bible really? Is it a rule book, a history text, a collection of totally separate stories? The source material we're looking at today suggests it's actually something else entirely. According to this perspective, the Bible is a unified epic. Think of it like an adventure story about a loving God carrying out a perfect plan to rescue humanity. It has all the elements of a great story, right? You've got a clear beginning, a dramatic conflict, a climactic rescue, and a promised resolution. So let's start at the beginning.
Every good epic needs a strong opening. It has to set the stage, a world we can understand before all the conflict begins. And for this story, that world is one of perfection. The story opens with God creating a perfect world, and our source here really highlights that this whole act was motivated entirely by love. At the very center of this creation are the first humans, and they enjoy this direct, trusting, and totally harmonious relationship with their Creator.
Now, this perfect relationship was built on trust. And that trust was tested by a single, pretty simple boundary. In a garden full of freedom, there was just one thing they were asked not to do.
And this is where the conflict gets introduced. A saboteur who shows up as a serpent enters the scene. And it doesn't use force, it uses doubt. It presents a choice. Keep going in this relationship of trust with God, or believe the lie that God is actually holding something back, that he can't really be trusted.
They chose to believe the lie. And this is a really crucial insight from our source. The problem wasn't just that they broke a rule, it was that they broke the relationship. The trust that was the very foundation of their world was completely shattered. This state of broken connection, this separation from God, is what the Bible calls sin. And it's presented not just as individual bad actions, but as the root cause of all the conflict, selfishness, and suffering that came crashing into the human story, fundamentally changing the world.
So who was this saboteur, and what's their role throughout the rest of this epic?
The source identifies this antagonist as Satan. Originally a powerful angel, his fall was driven by pride, and his primary weapons? Lies and accusation. His central goal is to just keep perpetuating that very first lie from the garden, to convince humanity that God is not good and cannot be trusted.
But here's a fascinating part of this epic. While the antagonist is presented as a real and active force of destruction, its ultimate defeat is never in doubt. The story basically asserts from the very beginning that the rescue plan will succeed. It's a done deal.
So how does that rescue unfold? Well, the story tells us that as soon as the relationship was broken, the rescue plan was immediately set in motion.
The entire first part of the Bible, the Old Testament, is basically portrayed as this grand act of foreshadowing. It's like, as you can see here, all these events and symbols and hundreds of specific prophecies are acting like clues, all building anticipation and painting this really detailed picture of a coming hero who will finally resolve the story's central conflict. And then, at the perfect moment in the story, the hero makes his entrance. Jesus, who is identified as God's own son, arrives on the scene living as a human. And through his teachings and these incredible miracles, he demonstrates that he is the one the entire story has been pointing towards. But right here, the story takes a shocking turn. The hero's path doesn't lead to a throne. It leads to a Roman cross. He's executed in the most brutal way you can imagine, which, of course, brings us to the obvious question, did the plan fail? Did the hero lose? And this is the story's great reveal, its central plot twist. This apparent defeat was actually the moment of ultimate victory. His death wasn't some tragedy that derailed the mission, it was the mission.
This is the concept the source calls the Great Exchange. And you can think of it this way. The broken relationship created a debt that humanity just couldn't pay. So Jesus, the hero, steps in and pays it for them, taking the consequences on himself to restore the relationship. And then the story offers a final stunning proof of his victory. 3 days after his death, Jesus rises from the dead. This act is presented as the ultimate demonstration of his power, proof that he conquered not just sin, but its ultimate consequence, death, and opened a pathway for anyone to be reconnected with God.
So, the climax is over. The heroic sacrifice has been made. The final act of the epic explains how a person actually enters into this story and accepts the rescue that's been offered.
To explain this, the source uses a really powerful analogy. It compares the process to a medical recovery. You've got the moment you get the cure, then the long process of rehabilitation, and finally, the promise of being made perfectly new.
And this breakdown is really helpful because it shows the journey isn't just a one-time event. According to this model, the cure for the spirit happens in an instant, the moment a person accepts the rescue. But then, the lifelong rehabilitation of the soul begins. That's renewing your mind, changing your habits. The final stage is the future promise of a redeemed body, the ultimate completion of the whole healing process.
So the crucial takeaway here is that this rescue is framed as both an instant reality and a lifelong process. It's the beginning of a transformation, a journey of learning how to live out the new life that's just been given.
And so this grand epic is brought right into the present moment. It's presented not as some dusty history book, but as an ongoing story, a complete narrative from creation to redemption that ends with an invitation, leaving each of us with one final question to consider. What is my role in this story?